Hey, Dan Passarelli here. Happy Friday. Has optimism returned back to the market? Well, it kind of seems like maybe it did this week. This week, from the low on Monday to the high today, which is just about where the S&P 500 closed, just about at the high, the S&P 500 was up a little over 8% from that low to that high. That's a pretty good week. Now, it's interesting that when the market really tanked a couple of weeks ago, well, that pessimism was based on some news that came out in the market that one surely could take as pretty pessimistic. The news this week, there wasn't really much news that drove this optimism. Is that a good sign? Or is that a bad sign? You can kind of make a case either way, but I kind of lean towards it being a little bit of a good sign. Now, that might not seem to make sense at first, but I kind of feel that way. You know why? Because, as they say with the market, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself, because there's kind of something to that, right? When everyone's really pessimistic and selling off stocks, it makes stocks go lower and makes people more pessimistic. But when there is that optimism in the market, it keeps it more buoyant. Now, we never want to have false optimism, but until we get actual solid data that gives us reason to be pessimistic, I don't think there's a need to be quite so pessimistic. Now, when does that data come? It's funny you should ask. That data comes, well, a lot of it comes next week. What's the big thing that we're worried about? Well, a lot of people are saying the word recession, and they're saying it, even though there's not really a definition for recession anymore. There used to be, but yeah, so I don't think anybody's going to acknowledge that we're in a recession if that ever happens. Clearly, we're not at this point. But that being said, we're going to get some pretty key data next week, because next week, oh my gosh, we've got just a barrage of labor data. And if we talk about that, that word, well, the employment situation, the jobs, that's one of the big drivers that would drive us towards that or lead us away from that. So it's a pretty big week next week with JOLTS coming out. That's a job openings report. With actually PCE is coming out next week, inflation data as well, which is just as relevant. We'll talk about that in just a second, as well as the weekly unemployment claims and, to boot, the monthly non-farm payrolls. So, oh my gosh, we're getting like all the news we could possibly want next week. Now, that's a lot of labor news, but it's also the PCE number. That's the Fed's favored inflation gauge. Well, that's going to have a lot to do with what is the possibility of interest rates staying where they are, or is there a potential for them coming down? Now, right now, at the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, their Fed funds rate futures contract is pricing in a little over a 91% chance of keeping interest rates unchanged. That comes in about a week and a half. No, 2.5 weeks, I think. May 7th, if I'm not mistaken. Still a little bit off, but all the news we get by the end of next week, I think we're going to have it's likely we're going to have a pretty darn clear picture of what Fed might do with rates. As of right now, yeah, they're just really likely to stay where they are. But hey, let's face it. While for a couple of years, all we cared about was rates coming down, because earning a decent rate on, bonds or even a CD at the bank. I mean, those were a competitor for the stock market when debt instruments are paying very, very low rates. There's nowhere else to put your money but in the stock market. And so that's how that was for a number of years. But Now the interest rate it's taking a little bit of a back seat to just the good old-fashioned nuts and bolts of the economy and seeing how strong it remains. I hope that helps. This is Dan Passarelli. Trade smart and have a great weekend.